You think you know what my son can and cannot do? You have no qualifications to make that determination. The professor's words cut through the air like a knife. But what happens when a black female dance teacher refuses to back down, believing in a disabled student's hidden talents more than his own father does? Watch as Dr. Reynolds' arrogance collides with Naomi Washington's expertise in this heartbreaking yet ultimately uplifting story of prejudice, disability, and the transformative power of art. When Elijah finally takes center stage, will his father's preconceptions shatter, or will they strengthen? What could possibly bring a proud, dismissive professor to tears in front of an entire audience? The answer will move you to your core. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. Ms. Washington, I need to speak with you. Now. The sharp voice cut through the emptying dance studio like a knife. Naomi Washington looked up from organizing her notes to see Dr. Malcolm Reynolds standing in the doorway, his tall frame rigid with barely contained anger. Dr. Reynolds, what a surprise, Naomi replied evenly, though her heart raced. She'd been expecting this confrontation since allowing Elijah Reynolds to join her dance class last week. How can I help you? You can explain why my son was participating in your dance class when he should have been in study hall, Dr. Reynolds demanded, striding into the room. His expensive suit and commanding presence filled the space with an almost suffocating authority. Elijah joined my class with proper permission, Naomi explained, maintaining her composure. He expressed interest. Dr. Reynolds scoffed. My son has a mobility disability. He uses assistive devices. What were you thinking, encouraging him to participate in an activity that could cause him harm? Principal Dorothy Sanders appeared in the doorway, clearly having heard the raised voices. Dr. Reynolds, is everything all right? No, everything is not all right. Ms. Washington here has taken it upon herself to put my son at risk. Naomi squared her shoulders. With all due respect, Dr. Reynolds, I've designed inclusive dance techniques specifically for students with different abilities. Elijah was never at risk. And what qualifies you to make that determination? His eyes narrowed as he looked her up and down dismissively. I'm certain your community college education didn't include specialized training in adaptive physical activities for disabled students. Principal Sanders interjected, Dr. Reynolds, Ms. Washington holds a master's in dance education from Juilliard with a specialization in adaptive dance techniques. The professor's expression flickered momentarily before hardening again. Regardless of her credentials, my son will not be participating in any more dance classes. I've already spoken with Coach Thompson about an alternative arrangement during that period. That should be Elijah's choice, Naomi said firmly. He showed remarkable aptitude and enthusiasm. Dr. Reynolds laughed coldly. Ms. Washington, I believe I know what's best for my own son. Keep your social experiments for someone else's child. As he turned to leave, Naomi called after him, Dr. Reynolds, have you asked Elijah what he wants? He paused at the doorway, not bothering to turn around. Some things aren't about what we want, Ms. Washington. They're about what's appropriate. I suggest you learn the difference. Elijah Reynolds sat alone at lunch, absently pushing food around his plate. 2 tables away, the dance students laughed together, occasionally glancing his way with sympathetic looks. Just 3 days ago, he'd been sitting with them, included in their circle after his first week in Ms. Washington's class. Now his father had put an end to that. Mind if I join you? The warm voice of Ms. Washington pulled him from his thoughts. Elijah shrugged, but inside he felt a spark of hope. I guess my dad talked to you. He did. Ms. Washington sat across from him. But I'd rather hear from you. Why did you want to join my class? Elijah hesitated, then admitted, I've always loved watching dance. The way people move, how they express things without words. His fingers tapped a rhythm on the table. Dad doesn't know, but I watch dance videos online all the time. You have natural rhythm, Elijah. I noticed it right away. He smiled briefly before his expression fell. Doesn't matter now. It matters very much, Ms. Washington said firmly. Your father believes he's protecting you, but sometimes people protect us from the very things that could help us grow. Elijah looked up. That first day, when you showed me how to adapt the movements, it was the first time I didn't feel like my disability was all people saw. A group of students passed by, and Elijah shrank slightly in his seat. One of them, a football player, called out, "Hey Reynolds, heard your dad freaked out about you doing the dance thing." Classic. Ms. Washington's expression remained neutral, but her eyes followed the student. Some people fear what they don't understand. Like my dad, Elijah muttered. Your father is concerned about your safety. But I think he's missing how powerful dance can be for everyone, regardless of physical limitations. Elijah fidgeted with his water bottle. I tried telling him that the modified movements you taught me actually helped with my physical therapy exercises. He just said that if I needed exercise, Coach Thompson would supervise something appropriate. Ms. Washington leaned forward. Elijah, would you still want to continue with dance if there was a way? More than anything, he replied without hesitation. When I was in your class, for the first time, I felt like I was leading my body instead of my body leading me. His voice dropped to a whisper. I actually felt graceful. You were, she confirmed. And you have real potential. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch period. Elijah gathered his things awkwardly, balancing with one hand on the table. Ms. Washington. My dad, he doesn't mean to be harsh. He's been different since Mom left. Everything became about protecting me, controlling everything. Sometimes I think he's afraid I'll disappear too. She nodded understandingly. Fears can make us build walls when we should be building bridges. As Elijah moved toward the exit, he turned back. If there was a way I could still dance, I'd take it. Dr. Malcolm Reynolds strode through the mahogany-paneled faculty lounge of Westbrook University's English department, nodding curtly at colleagues as he made his way to his usual corner armchair. The latest issue of the Literary Review lay waiting, as it always did on Tuesday afternoons. Malcolm. Heard there was some drama over at your son's school, called Professor Whitfield, a longtime colleague. Something about a dance class? Malcolm's jaw tightened. Nothing worth discussing, James. Simply a case of inappropriate expectations being placed on a student with physical limitations. Must be challenging, managing Elijah's education with his condition. I manage it by ensuring he receives proper accommodations, not misguided encouragement toward activities that could exacerbate his condition. Malcolm opened his journal pointedly, signaling the end of the conversation. As he pretended to read, his mind drifted to the confrontation with Ms. Washington. Something about her composed defiance had unsettled him more than he cared to admit. Most teachers back down immediately when faced with his credentials and authority. His phone vibrated with a text from Coach Thompson, spoke with E about alternative activities. He's resistant. Might need your intervention. Malcolm frowned. Before he could respond, Dean Harrison approached his chair. Reynolds, excellent paper on the degradation of literary standards in modern education. The board was particularly impressed with your stance on preserving classical curriculum over so-called arts integration. Thank you, Dean. I believe we're doing our students a disservice by diluting academic rigor with excessive focus on creative expression. Malcolm set aside his phone, momentarily forgetting about Elijah's situation. Precisely why we'd like you to head the committee reviewing the university's partnership programs with local schools. There's been pressure to expand arts education funding at the expense of core subjects. I'd be honored to bring some sanity to that discussion, Malcolm replied, warming to the subject. Just yesterday I witnessed the absurdity of these priorities firsthand. A dance teacher at my son's school attempting to include him in a dance program despite his mobility impairment. Sounds like misplaced priorities indeed, the dean agreed. How is Elijah, by the way? Still set on attending Westbrook when he graduates? Malcolm's expression clouded briefly. Of course. We're focusing on strengthening his academic foundation. He's quite bright when he applies himself properly. Later that evening, Malcolm arrived home to find Elijah at the kitchen table, textbooks spread around him. I spoke with Coach Thompson today, Malcolm began without preamble. He says you're being difficult about the alternative arrangements during dance period. Elijah didn't look up. I don't need another study hall. This isn't about what you need, it's about what's appropriate. Ms. Washington has no business encouraging unrealistic aspirations. She adapted everything specifically for me, Elijah countered, finally meeting his father's gaze. She has actual training in this, Dad. Malcolm removed his jacket, hanging it with precise movements. Having a certificate in adaptive dance doesn't qualify someone to make medical decisions about your condition. It wasn't your decision to make, Elijah said quietly. I am your father. It is absolutely my decision until you're an adult, Malcolm replied sharply. And frankly, I'm disappointed that you'd allow yourself to be put in a position where you'd inevitably fail. Elijah's face flushed. How would you know if I'd fail? You didn't even ask what we were doing. Because I know your limitations better than some teacher who met you 2 weeks ago. Malcolm's voice rose despite his attempt at control. This is exactly what happened when your mother filled your head with unrealistic expectations. I won't stand by and watch you get hurt again. The mention of his mother silenced Elijah immediately. He gathered his books, awkwardly managing them with his limited mobility. Your mother left us because she couldn't handle reality, Malcolm said more softly. I'm still here, making the hard choices, protecting you from disappointment. You're protecting me from living, Elijah muttered as he limped from the room. Malcolm stood alone in the kitchen, suddenly aware of the silence that permeated their home. He glanced at the refrigerator where a university brochure was prominently displayed, the path he'd carefully planned for his son's future, a path that left no room for frivolous detours like dance. The early morning sun streamed through the windows of the empty dance studio as Naomi Washington moved through her personal practice routine. This daily ritual connected her to her roots. Before she was Ms. Washington the teacher, she had been Naomi the principal dancer with the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater. As she completed her final sequence, she noticed Tanya Mitchell, the music teacher, watching from the doorway. Still got it, Tanya remarked, entering with 2 coffee cups. Though I don't know how you manage at this ungodly hour. Old habits, Naomi smiled, accepting the coffee gratefully. When you've spent 15 years waking up at 5 a.m. for company rehearsals, your body doesn't forget. Heard about your run-in with Dr. Reynolds, Tanya said, sitting on one of the benches. Word travels fast. Dorothy says he's threatening to go to the school board. Naomi sighed. It's not the first time I've dealt with parents who don't understand adaptive dance. Though most come around once they see the results. Malcolm Reynolds isn't most parents. He's got the university board in his pocket and half the town thinks he walks on water because of his family name. The Reynolds Library didn't name itself. And that makes his son's needs less important. Naomi shook her head. You should have seen Elijah in class, Tanya. That boy has rhythm in his soul that's been locked away. Tanya lowered her voice. Is this about Elijah or about proving something to people like Reynolds? Naomi paused, considering the question. When I first started teaching here after my injury ended my performance career, I had something to prove. Now. This is about Elijah and every student who's been told what they can't do instead of being shown what they can. The door opened again as Principal Sanders entered. Naomi, do you have a moment? Tanya excused herself with a supportive squeeze to Naomi's shoulder. Dr. Reynolds called the superintendent this morning, Principal Sanders said once they were alone. He's questioning our liability insurance for allowing his son to participate without medical clearance. That's a stalling tactic. Elijah's IEP clearly states physical activity is encouraged within appropriate modifications, which I provided. Naomi pulled a folder from her bag. Here's my documentation of every adaptation made for Elijah, along with photos demonstrating the modified positions. Dorothy examined the meticulous notes. This is thorough, as always. I didn't come to teaching on a whim, Dorothy. When my ACL tear ended my dance career, I specifically got my master's in adaptive dance education because I know what it feels like to have movement taken away from you. Principal Sanders nodded. I know your background, Naomi. That's why I hired you despite pressure to bring in someone with longer teaching experience. Because you saw that 10 years with Alvin Ailey and my work developing programs for dancers with disabilities might bring something valuable to our students, Naomi finished. Dr. Reynolds doesn't see that. He only sees what he expects to see. He sees a black woman challenging his authority over his son, Dorothy said bluntly. We both know that's part of this. Naomi sighed. Perhaps. But I've also seen this before with parents of children with disabilities. Sometimes it's easier to set limitations than to face fears. The school board meeting is next Tuesday. He's requested time to speak about safety concerns in specialized classes. Then I'll be there too, Naomi replied. With evidence of the program's success and safety record. As Principal Sanders left, Naomi turned to the window, watching students begin to arrive for the day. Among them, she spotted Elijah, moving carefully with his mobility aids, isolated from the groups of teenagers chatting animatedly around him. She remembered her own journey, the injury that ended her performing career, the depression that followed, and finally, the discovery that teaching dance to those who'd been excluded from it could be as fulfilling as performing had ever been. Everyone deserves to dance, she whispered to herself, a mantra that had carried her through her darkest days. For Elijah Reynolds, she would fight to make that true. The Westbrook High School boardroom hummed with tension as community members filed in. Naomi sat straight-backed in the front row, her portfolio of documentation neatly arranged on her lap. 3 seats down, Dr. Reynolds adjusted his tie, his expression imperious as he reviewed notes on his tablet. Principal Sanders caught Naomi's eye with a subtle nod of encouragement before taking her place at the board table. Board President Harrington called the meeting to order. We'll now address the concern raised by Dr. Malcolm Reynolds regarding adaptive physical activities for students with disabilities. Dr. Reynolds approached the podium with confident strides. Thank you for this opportunity. I come before you not just as a concerned parent, but as an educator dedicated to appropriate academic standards. He launched into a carefully structured argument, citing liability concerns and questioning the qualifications of certain staff to make determinations about physical activities for students with medical conditions. My son Elijah has a mobility disability requiring specialized care. He was encouraged to participate in dance activities that could exacerbate his condition or cause injury. When medical professionals prescribe limitations, it is not for teachers to contradict them, particularly those without medical training. Naomi noted he never once mentioned her by name, a deliberate tactic to depersonalize her, to make her position rather than her person the target. Furthermore, Dr. Reynolds continued, I've reviewed the school's insurance policy, which clearly states that activities for students with physical disabilities must be approved by qualified medical personnel. I found no evidence that such approval was sought in this case. When Dr. Reynolds finished, Board President Harrington turned to Principal Sanders. Has the school followed proper protocols in this situation? Before the principal could respond, Dr. Reynolds interjected, if I may add, the teacher in question appears to have prioritized inclusivity over safety, a commendable social goal perhaps, but not at the expense of medical prudence. Ms. Washington, would you like to respond? Principal Sanders redirected, giving Naomi the floor. Naomi approached the podium, acutely aware of Dr. Reynolds' subtle look of surprise that she would be permitted to speak directly. Thank you. I'm Naomi Washington, dance instructor at Westbrook High. I hold a master's degree in dance education with specialization in adaptive techniques for diverse abilities. She placed her certification documents on the table. Before teaching, I was a principal dancer with Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater and later developed adaptive dance programs for the National Dance Institute's Inclusion Initiative. She noted several board members' expressions shift. Clearly, Dr. Reynolds had presented her as unqualified, and they hadn't expected this level of expertise. Every student in my program receives individualized adaptations based on their abilities. For students with documented medical conditions, like Elijah Reynolds, I develop modifications that work within their medical parameters, not against them. She distributed her documentation. These are the specific adaptations created for Elijah, all of which complement his physical therapy goals rather than contradicting them. His participation was not only safe but therapeutically beneficial. Dr. Reynolds shifted uncomfortably as board members reviewed her materials. Lastly, Naomi concluded, Elijah himself expressed that these adapted movements gave him increased body awareness and control. Denying students opportunities based on assumptions about their limitations rather than their capabilities does them a disservice we should not accept as educators. The room fell silent as she returned to her seat. Dr. Reynolds' expression had hardened into a mask of controlled anger. After brief deliberation, the board determined that proper protocols had indeed been followed and that Ms. Washington's qualifications were more than adequate for providing adaptive dance instruction. As the meeting adjourned, Dr. Reynolds approached Naomi. "Impressive performance," he said coolly. "But this isn't over. My son will not be returning to your class." "That should be Elijah's choice," Naomi replied evenly. "He's a child who doesn't understand the consequences of overexertion on his condition. He's a young man who understands exactly what his body can do when given the right support," she countered. "Something you might learn if you watched him dance." Dr. Reynolds' eyes narrowed. "Ms. Washington, you've won the board over, but you don't have my permission. And without that, Elijah cannot legally participate in your program." As he walked away, Naomi realized this battle would not be won in board rooms or with credentials. Somehow, she needed to reach not just Elijah, but his father as well. "Listen up, everyone." Naomi called over the chatter of her fifth-period dance class. "I've got a special announcement about this semester's showcase." The students gathered around, their energy filling the studio. Naomi noticed Elijah standing in the doorway, hesitating. Though he'd been prohibited from taking the class, he often lingered outside during his study hall period. "Elijah," she called, "this concerns you too. Please join us." He glanced nervously down the hallway before entering, using his forearm crutches carefully as he made his way to the group. "This year's showcase will focus on movement without boundaries," Naomi announced. "We'll be creating a performance that demonstrates how dance can be adapted for all bodies and abilities. I've received special permission from Principal Sanders for this educational project." Excited murmurs spread through the group. Naomi continued, "Each of you will develop a sequence that can be performed in multiple ways, standing, seated, with mobility aids, or with limited range of motion." "Like how you showed Elijah that first day?" asked Zoe, one of the advanced dancers. "Exactly," Naomi nodded. "The goal is to demonstrate that dance isn't about conforming to a single idea of movement, but about expressing yourself through whatever movement is available to you." She distributed information packets. These contain research on adaptive dance, examples of professional companies that include dancers with disabilities, and guidelines for our project. When she handed Elijah his packet, he whispered, "My dad will never allow this. This is an educational opportunity open to all students as observers, even during study hall," she replied quietly. "You're here to learn about dance as cultural history, not to participate." A slow smile spread across his face as he understood her workaround. "Now," Naomi addressed the class, "I'll need volunteers to work on different aspects of the showcase. Choreography teams, music selection, program design." Hands shot up around the room. To everyone's surprise, Elijah's hand rose tentatively. "I could help with choreography," he offered. "I've been studying videos of Axis Dance Company and Infinite Flow. They specialize in dance that incorporates wheelchair users and people with mobility devices. The other students looked at him with newfound respect. Perfect, Naomi smiled. Elijah will consult on adaptive choreography. Remember, he can observe and advise as part of his independent study in performing arts history. Over the following weeks, the studio transformed. Students experimented with movement restrictions, dancing with an arm immobilized, while seated, or with limited vision, to understand different adaptations. Elijah thrived in his consultant role, demonstrating how traditional dance movements could be modified. Though technically not participating, he showed others how to adapt moves while explaining techniques. The key, he told a group of dancers struggling with a modified turn sequence, is to focus on the intention of the movement rather than the specific form. Watch. He demonstrated from his seated position how the essence of a pirouette could be captured through upper body movement and arm positioning. That's it. Naomi encouraged. The audience doesn't need to see the traditional spin to feel the energy of the turn. One afternoon, Naomi found Elijah working alone in the studio during lunch. Choreographing, she asked, noticing him moving through a sequence with his crutches. Just experimenting, he admitted. I've been practicing at home too, in my room where Dad can't see. Show me, she encouraged. Elijah demonstrated a sequence he'd developed, using his mobility aids as extension of his arms, creating sweeping arcs and controlled movements that worked with his balance limitations rather than against them. Elijah, that's beautiful, Naomi said softly. That should be in the showcase. He shook his head. Dad would never allow it. He's already suspicious about my observer role. What if we don't tell him you'll be performing until he's already in the audience? Naomi suggested. Sometimes people need to see something to understand it. He'd just get up and leave, Elijah sighed. Or worse, he'd make a scene and pull me out. Or, Naomi countered, he might finally see what you're capable of. Elijah considered this. There's one way it might work. Dad respects structure and academic frameworks. If the performance was presented as an educational demonstration rather than a creative expression. A lecture demonstration on the physics and therapeutic benefits of adaptive movement, Naomi nodded, catching on. Exactly, Elijah's eyes lit up. He responds to research and evidence. If we frame it that way, and I'm not introduced as a performer but as a subject demonstrating techniques. It might just work, Naomi agreed. We'll need to be strategic about how we present this. As they developed the plan, other students joined in, excited by the challenge of creating something that might change Dr. Reynolds' perspective. Let's make this showcase so academically sound that even the most skeptical professor can't dismiss it, Naomi told the class. And let's make it so beautiful that even the hardest heart can't remain unmoved. Absolutely not, Dr. Reynolds slammed his hand on the dining table, causing the water glasses to jump. This showcase is nothing but an attempt to circumvent my explicit instructions. Elijah had finally gathered the courage to mention the upcoming event, carefully describing it as an educational demonstration about adaptive movement techniques rather than a dance performance. It's an academic presentation, Elijah insisted. The whole thing is based on research about therapeutic movement for people with physical disabilities. It's exactly the kind of evidence-based approach you're always talking about. Malcolm paced the kitchen. And you expect me to believe Ms. Washington suddenly transformed her dance class into a scientific study? This is manipulation, plain and simple. Dad, you always say I should engage with academic exploration of topics related to my condition. This is that. Don't twist my words, Malcolm snapped. There's a world of difference between reading peer-reviewed research and participating in untested physical activities. Coach Thompson's timely arrival interrupted their argument. Malcolm had invited him for dinner to discuss appropriate physical activities for Elijah, a transparent attempt to counter Ms. Washington's influence. Evening, Dr. Reynolds. Elijah. The coach nodded as he entered, the tension in the room immediately apparent to him. During dinner, Malcolm steered the conversation toward his concerns. Richard, as someone with actual qualifications in physical education, what's your professional opinion about dance activities for someone with Elijah's condition? Coach Thompson dabbed his mouth with a napkin before answering. Well, traditional dance places significant strain on joints and requires balance that could be problematic. I've always advocated for more controlled, strength-building exercises. Exactly, Malcolm nodded emphatically. Controlled environments with proper supervision. The showcase has modified movements specifically designed, Elijah began. Ms. Washington means well, Coach Thompson interrupted, but her background is in performance, not therapeutic exercise. In my 20 years of coaching, I've seen well-intentioned teachers cause setbacks for students with physical limitations. Elijah's fork clattered against his plate. You've never even seen what we're doing. How can you judge it? I don't need to see it, Thompson replied confidently. Dance is inherently unpredictable. That's why sports have specific rules and controlled movements. This is exactly why I wanted you here tonight, Malcolm told Thompson. Elijah needs to hear from someone with proper credentials. Ms. Washington has credentials too, Elijah protested. She studied adaptive dance techniques specifically for people with disabilities. Malcolm waved dismissively. A few workshops don't compare to Coach Thompson's degree in physical education and decades of experience. It wasn't workshops. She has a master's degree specializing in this exact field, Elijah countered, his voice rising. You'd know that if you bother to look at her qualifications instead of just assuming she's unqualified because. He stopped abruptly, the unfinished implication hanging in the air. Because what, Elijah? Malcolm's voice had gone dangerously quiet. Because she doesn't fit your idea of what an expert looks like, Elijah finished, meeting his father's gaze. Coach Thompson cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps I should go. No, please stay, Malcolm insisted. My son seems to think I'm dismissing Ms. Washington for inappropriate reasons, when my only concern is his well-being. Dad, if you just came to the showcase. I've heard enough about this showcase, Malcolm cut him off. Richard, would you be willing to develop a specialized program for Elijah during that dance period? Something with proper therapeutic value? Of course, Thompson replied, though he glanced uneasily at Elijah. We could focus on upper body strength and controlled mobility exercises. Later, after Coach Thompson had left, Elijah found his father in his study. Dad, I need you to hear me. This showcase matters to me. For once, I've found something that makes me feel capable instead of limited. Malcolm looked up from his papers. I understand you're disappointed. No, you don't, Elijah said quietly. You think you're protecting me, but you're actually the one person making me feel more disabled than anyone else. Malcolm flinched. That's unfair. Is it? Everyone else at school sees possibilities for me. You only see limitations. Elijah turned to leave, then paused. Mom would have come to watch me. The mention of his ex-wife struck Malcolm like a physical blow. Your mother made many promises she couldn't keep, he said bitterly. I'm still here, making the hard decisions. Maybe some decisions shouldn't be so hard, Elijah replied, leaving Malcolm alone with the weight of his son's words. The auditorium buzzed with activity as students moved through their positions for the 10th time that afternoon. Naomi watched critically, making notes on her clipboard as Tanya adjusted the music cues. Let's take it from the transition to the third movement, Naomi called. Remember, this is where we demonstrate how the same choreographic intention can be expressed through different physical adaptations. The dancers moved into position, some standing traditionally, others seated in chairs, and two using mobility aids. The empty space in the formation was conspicuous. We need Elijah for this section, Zoe said, voicing what everyone was thinking. His movement with the crutches is what ties the whole sequence together. Naomi sighed. I know. Let's work on the technical aspects for now. Lighting crew, can we get the spotlight focused on center stage for the solo section? As the technical team adjusted lights, Tanya approached Naomi. Any word from Elijah? It's been 3 days. Nothing since his father forbade him from participating, Naomi replied quietly. I've tried reaching out, but Dr. Reynolds has complained to administration about harassment if I contact Elijah directly. The side door opened, and a figure slipped in. Sorry I'm late, Elijah called, making his way carefully down the aisle. Dad had Coach Thompson watching me like a hawk during study hall. The students broke into spontaneous applause as he joined them on stage. How did you get away? Naomi asked. Told them I was going to chemistry tutoring, Elijah grinned. Technically not a lie, Zoe is in AP chemistry, and she's helping me with homework after rehearsal. Clever, Naomi nodded approvingly. But I don't want you getting in trouble at home. It's worth it, Elijah said firmly. I've been practicing my sequences in my bedroom. I think I've figured out how to make the transition smoother between the seated and standing portions. They worked intensively for the next 2 hours. Elijah's determination was infectious, pushing the other students to refine their performances with similar dedication. When he demonstrated a complex sequence using his crutches as both support and expressive elements, even the most experienced dancers watched in admiration. That's incredible, Zoe told him. You're making the mobility aids part of the dance, not just working around them. That's the whole point, Naomi explained to the group. Adaptive dance isn't about overcoming limitations, it's about discovering new possibilities within different parameters. As they took a break, Naomi noticed Elijah massaging his shoulders. Are you in pain? She asked quietly. Just the usual, he shrugged. Extended movement always causes some discomfort, but it's the good kind, like after physical therapy. We can modify further if needed. He shook his head. The current adaptations are perfect. Actually, my PT said some of these movements have improved my core strength more than our regular exercises. Naomi smiled. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. We'll need that documented for your father. Speaking of which, Elijah lowered his voice, he's still insisting on picking me up early the day of the showcase so I can't participate. He thinks it's just a regular performance, not the special demonstration we've planned. Principal Sanders is handling that, Naomi assured him. She's scheduled a mandatory parent information session about next year's curriculum at the same time as our technical rehearsal. Your father's academic committee position means he can't miss it. That's brilliant, Elijah grinned. But what about the actual showcase? We've moved your feature section to the beginning, before he would have any chance to intervene. Once he sees what you can do. She left the sentence unfinished, hoping her confidence wasn't misplaced. As rehearsal resumed, Naomi watched Elijah working with the other students, showing them how to adapt movements to accommodate different abilities. His natural teaching ability surprised her, he had an intuitive understanding of how to communicate physical concepts. You know, Tanya observed, joining Naomi at the sidelines, he's got a future in this if he wants it. Not just performing, but possibly teaching adaptive techniques. If his father allows it, Naomi sighed. After seeing this showcase, how could he not? Tanya replied. You've created something transformative here. Elijah created it, Naomi corrected. I just provided the space and structure. Everything meaningful came from him and the other students. As the rehearsal concluded, Elijah approached Naomi with an unexpected request. I want to expand my solo section, he said. I've been working on something more challenging. Are you sure? We don't want to push too far. That's what my dad always says, Elijah replied with surprising intensity. I'm sure. I want to show not just what I can do despite my disability, but what I can do because of it, ways of moving that only make sense with my body and my mobility aids. Naomi studied him for a moment, seeing not just determination but a profound understanding of what the showcase truly represented. Show me, she said simply. What Elijah demonstrated next left everyone in the auditorium speechless, a complex sequence that incorporated his crutches as both support and expressive elements, creating movements that would be impossible for dancers without mobility aids. It wasn't just adaptive dance, it was innovative movement that expanded the very definition of dance itself. That, Naomi said when he finished, is going to change some minds. Principal Sanders stood at her office window, watching students stream into the building for morning classes. When she turned back to face Dr. Reynolds, her expression was professionally neutral despite the tension in the room. "I appreciate your concerns, Dr. Reynolds, but I cannot remove Ms. Washington from her position based on your personal disagreement with her teaching methods." Malcolm leaned forward in his chair. "This isn't about disagreement, Principal Sanders. It's about a teacher who continues to undermine parental authority and encourage my son to participate in activities against medical advice. Ms. Washington has documented approval from Elijah's physical therapist for all activities," Principal Sanders countered, sliding a folder across her desk. "His doctor has confirmed these adapted movements complement his therapy." Malcolm barely glanced at the folder. "Obtained without my knowledge or consent." "Actually, the paperwork was processed through the school's standard channels for activity clearance, which you signed at the beginning of the year." A knock at the door interrupted them as Naomi entered, having been summoned to the meeting. "Ms. Washington," Malcolm acknowledged coldly. "I've asked Ms. Washington to join us because this concerns her directly," Principal Sanders explained. "I believe in transparent communication." Naomi took a seat. "Dr. Reynolds, I understand your concerns about Elijah's participation in dance activities. I hope we can find a resolution that respects both your parental authority and Elijah's growing independence." "There's nothing to resolve," Malcolm stated flatly. "I've made my decision. Elijah will not participate in your showcase or any dance activities. Furthermore, I'm requesting his complete removal from any class or event under your supervision." Principal Sanders intervened. "That would disrupt his entire schedule mid-semester and potentially affect his graduation requirements." "Then I'll transfer him to Westview Academy," Malcolm countered. "They've already confirmed they can accommodate his academic needs without unnecessary distractions." The threat hung heavy in the air. Westview was an expensive private school known for its rigid academic approach and minimal arts programming. "Dr. Reynolds," Naomi spoke carefully, "before you make such a drastic decision, I'd like to invite you to observe our rehearsal process. See for yourself the precautions and adaptations we've implemented." "I don't need to observe to understand the situation," he dismissed. "With respect," Naomi persisted, "I believe you do. You've made assumptions about what happens in my classroom without first-hand knowledge." Malcolm's expression hardened. "Are you suggesting I'm uninformed about my son's condition?" "Not at all. I'm suggesting you're uninformed about my teaching methodology and the specific accommodations designed for Elijah." Principal Sanders interjected diplomatically. "Perhaps a compromise? Dr. Reynolds, what if you observed a rehearsal with the school's physical education specialist present to evaluate safety protocols?" "That would be Coach Thompson, I presume?" Malcolm asked. "At least he has appropriate credentials." Naomi bit back a response about Thompson's complete lack of adaptive movement training, instead saying, "I welcome any qualified observer." "And after this observation," Malcolm continued, "if I still determine the activities inappropriate for Elijah's condition, you'll respect my decision without further argument?" "If your decision is based on actual observation rather than preconception, yes," Naomi agreed. Malcolm considered this. "Very well. One observation, with Coach Thompson present. After that, I make my final decision with no further interference." As the meeting concluded, Principal Sanders held Naomi back. "Are you sure about this? You're gambling Elijah's continued participation on one observation by someone who's determined to find fault." "I'm betting on Elijah," Naomi replied. "And on Dr. Reynolds being honest enough to acknowledge what he sees, not just what he expects to see." Later that day, Naomi found Elijah waiting anxiously outside her classroom. My dad just texted me, he said without preamble. He's coming to tomorrow's rehearsal, and then he's deciding whether to transfer me to Westview. I know, Naomi acknowledged. It was the only compromise available. Westview doesn't even have arts programs, Elijah said, distress evident in his voice. It's all AP classes and test prep. Then we make tomorrow's rehearsal count, Naomi said firmly. No special performance, no attempt to impress, just honest demonstration of what we've been doing all along. He's bringing Coach Thompson as his expert witness, Elijah added bitterly. Good, Naomi surprised him with her response. The more witnesses to your abilities, the better. Coach Thompson may be aligned with your father, but he's not dishonest. If he sees genuine therapeutic value, he'll have to acknowledge it. Elijah didn't look convinced. This feels like my last chance. Not your last chance to dance, Naomi corrected. Just your last chance to convince your father to support it. Either way, you've discovered something important about yourself that no one can take away. Elijah straightened his shoulders with new resolve. Tomorrow, then. I'll show him exactly what I can do. Not what you can do despite your disability, Naomi reminded him, echoing his own words from earlier, but what you can do because of it. That's what will change his mind, if anything can. Elijah sat on the edge of his bed, carefully polishing his forearm crutches until the metal gleamed in the lamplight. Tomorrow everything would change, either his father would finally see him as he truly was, or he'd be transferred to Westview, away from the one place he'd felt truly accepted. A knock on his bedroom door startled him. His father rarely came to his room in the evenings, preferring to retreat to his study with academic journals and a glass of scotch. Come in, Elijah called, hastily setting aside the crutches. Malcolm entered, his expression unreadable. I wanted to discuss tomorrow's observation. There's nothing to discuss, Elijah replied. You've already made up your mind. Malcolm sighed, taking a seat in the desk chair. I promise to observe with an open mind, and I will. Will you? Elijah challenged. Because it seems like you decided Ms. Washington was unqualified the moment you met her. A flash of something, guilt, perhaps, crossed Malcolm's face before he composed himself. My concerns have always been about your safety and well-being. No, Elijah shook his head. They've been about your fears and your control. Malcolm's jaw tightened, but surprisingly, he didn't argue. Instead, he glanced at the polished crutches. You've been maintaining your equipment. They're not just equipment, Dad. They're an extension of me. Elijah picked up one crutch, demonstrating how it fit perfectly against his forearm. In dance, they become part of the expression, not just mobility aids. Malcolm watched his son's movements with an expression Elijah couldn't quite decipher. Your mother always said you had an artistic sensitivity, Malcolm said softly. I thought she was projecting her own interests onto you. The rare mention of his mother without bitterness caught Elijah off guard. She understood parts of me that you never tried to see. Malcolm nodded slowly. Perhaps. But she also made promises she couldn't keep, filled your head with dreams that led to disappointment. Like what? Elijah asked, genuinely curious about this glimpse into his parents' past disagreements. She told you that you could do anything, be anything, without acknowledging the real limitations of your condition, Malcolm explained. After that dance recital when you were 7, when you fell and needed surgery afterward, she couldn't face the reality of what her encouragement had cost you. Elijah was silent for a moment, processing. So you think she left because of my disability? Because I got hurt? Malcolm looked away. She left because she couldn't handle the responsibility of making difficult decisions for your welfare. She wanted to be your friend, not your parent. And you decided to be my protector instead of my supporter, Elijah concluded. Someone had to be realistic, Malcolm defended. Every time you've pushed beyond your physical limitations, you've suffered for it. But what about the suffering from not trying at all? Elijah asked quietly. What about the cost of never discovering what I might actually be capable of? Malcolm had no immediate answer for that. He stood, straightening his sweater in a characteristic gesture of discomfort. I should let you rest before tomorrow. Dad, Elijah called as his father reached the door. Whatever you decide after tomorrow, just know that dance has given me something I never had before. It's not about proving something or defying limitations. It's about finding a way to express who I am through the body I have, not despite it. Malcolm paused, his hand on the doorknob. I'll see you in the morning, he said finally, and left. Across town, Naomi sat at her kitchen table surrounded by documentation, medical clearances, adaptation notes, research studies on adaptive dance benefits. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tanya, everything ready for tomorrow? As ready as it can be, she replied, though doubt nagged at her. Had she pushed too far in challenging Dr. Reynolds? Was she risking Elijah's relationship with his father for the sake of proving a point? She remembered her own father's disapproval when she'd chosen dance over the medical career he'd planned for her. That rift had never fully healed before his death, leaving wounds that still ached years later. This isn't about me, she reminded herself aloud. This is about Elijah having the chance to discover his own capabilities. Still, as she organized her materials for tomorrow's observation, she couldn't help wondering if she'd done enough, if anything would be enough to penetrate the protective wall Dr. Reynolds had built around his son and his own preconceptions. Her phone rang. Principal Sanders calling at this late hour couldn't be good news. Dorothy, she answered. Is everything all right? Coach Thompson just called me, the principal said without preamble. He's been researching adaptive dance techniques all evening, apparently having second thoughts about his initial dismissal. That's unexpected, Naomi replied cautiously. He mentioned something about watching videos of the Axis Dance Company that Elijah had recommended to him. Said it opened his eyes to possibilities he hadn't considered. A small flame of hope kindled in Naomi's chest. So he might actually provide an objective assessment tomorrow? Don't count on Dr. Reynolds changing his mind easily, Dorothy cautioned. But having Thompson potentially in your corner could make a difference. After they hung up, Naomi returned to her preparations with renewed purpose. Tomorrow wouldn't just be about changing one father's mind, it would be about demonstrating the transformative power of inclusive arts education. As she finally prepared for bed, Naomi whispered the mantra that had guided her career transition years ago: dance isn't about perfect bodies making perfect movements. It's about real bodies making authentic expressions. Tomorrow, she hoped, Dr. Malcolm Reynolds would finally see his son's authentic expression, and recognize the beauty in it. The auditorium hummed with anticipation as students made final adjustments to costumes and props. Naomi moved through the organized chaos, offering reassurance and last-minute guidance. Has anyone seen Elijah? She asked, checking her watch anxiously. The showcase would begin in 20 minutes, and their lead performer was nowhere to be found. Zoe approached, concern etched on her face. No sign of him, Ms. Washington. I've tried texting, but no response. Before Naomi could reply, Principal Sanders appeared backstage. Dr. Reynolds just arrived, she reported quietly. He's in the audience, third row center. No sign of Elijah with him. He wouldn't actually transfer Elijah without warning, would he? Naomi asked, though she feared she knew the answer. After yesterday's observation, I thought things were improving, the principal replied. Coach Thompson's positive assessment seemed to make an impression. The stage manager approached urgently. Ms. Washington, 5-minute call. Do we need to rework the opening without Elijah? Naomi closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. Not yet. Let's give him a few more minutes. As if summoned by her faith, the backstage door burst open. Elijah entered, slightly breathless, still wearing his street clothes. Sorry, he called. Dad insisted on driving me himself. I think he was deciding until the last minute whether to let me come. Relief washed over Naomi. Quickly, get changed. We're on in 5. As Elijah hurried to the dressing room, Naomi gathered the performers for final instructions. Remember, this isn't just a performance, it's a demonstration of possibility. Dance with intention, with joy, and with authenticity. Minutes later, the house lights dimmed. Principal Sanders stepped onto the stage to introduce the showcase. Welcome to Movement Without Boundaries, a special presentation exploring adaptive dance techniques and inclusive movement education. This showcase represents months of research and practice by our students under the guidance of Ms. Naomi Washington. From her position in the wings, Naomi could see Dr. Reynolds in the audience, his posture rigid, expression carefully neutral. The curtain rose on the opening tableau, dancers in various positions, some standing traditionally, others seated, creating a unified visual composition despite their different physical orientations to space. As the music began, the dancers moved through the first sequence, a demonstration of how the same choreographic intention could be expressed through different physical adaptations. Then came Elijah's entrance. A spotlight illuminated him as he moved center stage, his crutches gleaming under the lights. The audience fell completely silent. What followed was 3 minutes of transcendent movement. Elijah performed the sequence they had rehearsed, but with an emotional intensity they had never seen before. His movements were precise, controlled, yet profoundly expressive, demonstrating not limitation but transformation of traditional dance vocabulary. The crutches became extensions of his arms, creating sweeping arcs and dynamic shapes impossible for dancers without such implements. His unique physicality wasn't disguised or compensated for, it was celebrated, highlighted as the source of a distinctive movement vocabulary. Naomi glanced at Dr. Reynolds. His composed facade had crumbled. He leaned forward in his seat, eyes fixed on his son, his expression a complex mixture of astonishment, concern, and something that looked remarkably like pride. As Elijah completed his solo, the other dancers joined him, their movements now influenced by the patterns he had established. It was no longer about adapting traditional dance for a disabled performer, it was about all dancers finding new movement possibilities inspired by diverse physical experiences. The sequence concluded with Elijah at the center of a formation that radiated outward, visually representing how differences can become the center from which new possibilities emerge. As the music faded, there was a moment of profound silence before the audience erupted in applause. Students rose to their feet, followed quickly by parents and faculty. Through the stage lights, Naomi could see Dr. Reynolds still seated, seemingly frozen in place. Then, slowly, he stood, his eyes never leaving his son. As applause continued around him, something unprecedented happened, a tear slid down his cheek, caught in the reflected stage light for all to see. Backstage after the performance, Elijah was surrounded by congratulating classmates when a hush fell over the group. Dr. Reynolds stood in the doorway, his usual commanding presence somehow diminished. "Elijah," he said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "May I speak with you?" The students parted as Elijah moved toward his father, uncertainty in his expression. Dr. Reynolds looked at his son as if seeing him for the first time. "What you did out there?" He began, then stopped, seeming to struggle for words, a man unaccustomed to being at a loss for them. "I've never seen anything like it." "Is that good or bad?" Elijah asked cautiously. "It was." Dr. Reynolds paused again. "Extraordinary. You were extraordinary." The tension visibly left Elijah's body. "Really?" Dr. Reynolds nodded, emotion making further speech difficult. Instead, he did something he hadn't done in years, he opened his arms to his son. As Elijah moved into his father's embrace, Naomi quietly ushered the other students away, giving them privacy in this moment of transformation. 2 weeks after the showcase, Naomi arrived at her studio to find Dr. Reynolds waiting outside the door. Their interactions since the performance had been limited to brief, civil acknowledgments when he picked up Elijah from class, a dramatic improvement, but still marked by lingering awkwardness. "Dr. Reynolds," she greeted him cautiously. "Is everything all right with Elijah?" "Yes, quite well, actually," he replied. I was hoping to speak with you privately before class begins. She unlocked the studio, inviting him inside. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the space where so much had changed for both Elijah and his father. "I owe you an apology, Ms. Washington," Malcolm began formally. "My behavior toward you was inexcusable. I made assumptions based on prejudices I didn't even recognize I held." Naomi appreciated his directness. "Thank you for acknowledging that. I've spent my career advocating for evidence-based approaches," he continued, "yet I refuse to examine the evidence of your qualifications or the benefits of your teaching methods. That was hypocritical of me. We all have blind spots, Dr. Reynolds. What matters is our willingness to recognize them when they're pointed out." Malcolm nodded thoughtfully. "Elijah has been different since the showcase, more confident, more engaged, even in his academic subjects. His physical therapist reports improvement in his core strength and coordination." "Dance can be transformative," Naomi replied. "Not just physically, but emotionally and socially as well." "I've been doing some research," Malcolm admitted, "about adaptive arts education and its effects on students with disabilities. The literature is quite compelling." Naomi smiled at the professor's characteristic approach, turning to academic research to process his changed perspective. "I wonder," he continued more hesitantly, "if you might be willing to present your methods at an upcoming education conference at the university? We're hosting a symposium on inclusive education next month, and your work deserves wider recognition." Surprised by the offer, Naomi considered it carefully. "I'd be honored, especially if some of my students could demonstrate the techniques we've developed." "Including Elijah?" Malcolm asked. "If he's willing," Naomi nodded. "He's shown real leadership potential. In fact, he's been helping me design new adaptations for other students." Malcolm's expression softened with pride. He mentioned he might be interested in studying adaptive physical education in college. "A path I wouldn't have imagined, or supported, before." "He has a natural talent for it," Naomi confirmed. "He understands both the technical aspects and the emotional experience of discovering new movement possibilities." As they discussed details of the upcoming presentation, students began arriving for class. Elijah entered, surprise registering on his face at seeing his father in the studio. "Dad? Is everything okay?" "Everything is fine," Malcolm assured him. "Ms. Washington and I were discussing the university symposium. I should leave you to your class." As he turned to go, he paused, watching the students warming up, a diverse group of bodies and abilities preparing to move together. "You know," he said quietly to Naomi, when Elijah's mother left, "I thought I needed to protect him from disappointment by limiting his aspirations to what I deemed realistic. I was so focused on what he couldn't do that I became blind to what he could." "It's never too late to see things differently," Naomi replied. Malcolm nodded. "Thank you for helping me see my son, truly see him, perhaps for the first time." As he left, Elijah approached Naomi. "What was that about?" "Your father is learning to dance in his own way," she smiled. "It's not easy changing the patterns of a lifetime, but he's making the effort." Elijah watched his father through the window as he walked across the parking lot, his posture still straight and dignified, but somehow less rigid than before. "He asked about my college plans last night," Elijah shared. "Actually listened when I talked about studying adaptive physical education. He even suggested some schools with strong programs." Naomi squeezed his shoulder gently. "Some transformations happen in an instant, others take time. The important thing is that they've begun." As class started, Naomi watched Elijah demonstrating a movement sequence to a new student with cerebral palsy, patient, attentive, finding possibilities rather than focusing on limitations. In that moment, she could see clearly the ripple effects of transformation, from teacher to student, from student to parent, and outward into the wider community. It was, she reflected, the most important choreography of all. "Dear friend, This story reminds us that our greatest limitations often exist in our minds, not our bodies. When we define people by what they cannot do rather than exploring what they can, we rob them of dignity and possibility. True inclusion isn't about pretending differences don't exist, it's about recognizing the unique value that different perspectives and abilities bring to our shared human experience. Every person deserves the chance to express themselves fully, whether through dance, art, academics, or any other passion. And sometimes, the most profound teaching happens when we open ourselves to learning from those we thought we needed to protect or instruct. If this message resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more stories that challenge and inspire. Together, we can create a more inclusive world.